Hello, my name is John Pershing Smith, or JP to most of my friends, and the story today is called No Silver Spoon. And what I want to do right here is give you a little background on me as a young lad and my entrepreneurial beginnings. And you might ask, why do I need to hear stories like this? And I'll bring it together for you at the end. Part one, I was born in a little sharecropper's cabin in Toombs County, Georgia, November 1941. Just 3 weeks prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor. My father then moved us to Brunswick, Georgia in June of '42, as he'd been one of thousands hired to help build Liberty ships for the war at the shipyard there. I'll tell you that we lived a day-by-day existence as my dad went from job to job and drank up most of his paycheck and got in fights, spent the night in jail from time to time, and my mom getting clothes from the Salvation Army for my 4 brothers and me. And my grandfather on my dad's side was murdered before I was born, and my grandfather on my mother's side was the only one I ever knew. But he was an avid reader of Westerns by Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey, along with Ian Fleming's James Bond, Mickey Spillane, Mike Hammer, detective novels, etc. And he always made sure that I got them when he was finished. And I read and read and read and read. I began to realize that I was seeing things outside of my circumstances. And as I read Ian Fleming novels and others, I traveled all over the world in my mind. And I decided right then and there that I didn't like the way we lived. Later in life, I read everything I could get my hands on. But by the time I was 8 years old, I was going up and down the streets of my neighborhood, dirt roads, hot as heck in my bare feet in the summertime, where people would have a soda and toss the bottle. And here I came, picking up the bottles, returning them to a little neighborhood grocery store and claiming a few cents deposit on each one. And later I procured an old red wagon that made my job a little bit easier and helped me take even more bottles. Now, people in the neighborhood seeing what I was doing would start putting a couple of 3 bottles out by the roads for me to pick up. I'd buy comic books to read, and back then, located in the back of the book, there was always some ads in the back, and where you could order Bible verses printed in gold or silver fleck print on purple backgrounds. I'd order them by the dozens at a price, and I'd go up and down the street knocking on neighbors' doors, asking them to buy them from me at retail price so that I could make enough money to buy a bicycle to ride to school. Well, can you imagine a little tow-headed, barefoot boy coming to your door, knocking and said, "Excuse me, will you buy one of my Bible scripture cards to help me buy a bicycle to ride to school?" And I'd hold one up while quoting the Bible verse. "For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son," etc. Well, by the time I was about 10 or 11, I started walking to the city police department in my town and convinced them to let me have old bicycles which had been tossed and picked up by the police department. They had them stored out back along with thousands of other things in their back lot. And I'd take those pieces home, and I began to make whole bicycles that could be sold for a few dollars, and made one for myself so I could get a job as a paper boy. Well, sometime I would need a specific part, and I would go up to Mr. Gentilette's bike shop and ask Mr. Gentilette if he would trade me a tire tube for a couple of my extra tires, and he would usually do that. Well, these old bikes probably looked like old country music star Johnny Cash's car that he sang called about One Piece at a Time, about where he had been taking the pieces of Cadillacs from the Cadillac plant he worked over the years and making a strange-looking Cadillac he called a psychobiliac. Well, I finally sold enough of those Frankenstein bikes at a couple of $3 each, and I saved enough. I was able to buy myself a new Western Flyer bicycle, which a couple of years came in later as I got a newspaper route to deliver the Brunswick News, and I did that for about 3 years. During my last couple of years at high school, I worked at a Sunoco station for a year, and then S&H Crest 5 and 10 cent store for my senior year. When I finished school, I worked construction with my dad for a while and then to another service station. And some of you might remember back in those days in the USA that a service station was exactly what it said. We weren't gas stations or convenience stores. We had an air hose across the driveway with a bell on one end that rang when a car ran over it, and out the door I'd go. Well, this particular winter was really brutal, and when a car came in, they would say, "Give me $2 worth of gas," or something similar. Well, I'd pump the gas, check the oil and water under the hood, check the air in the tires, clean the windshield, whisk out the front floorboards, and all that in that cold. Well, I pretty soon had enough of working outdoors, and about that time I heard that Sears Roebuck was opening a new store in town that would be opening in February of 1962. Well, I headed down to the old catalog store and put in an application, and I was hired working in the warehouse, assembling items to take to the store for display on the floor. Well, that started my retail career, and then see me move to customer service, and then division manager in several departments, and then another company as a manager trainee, then store manager, and from there opening my own retail sporting store. Well, I met and became great friends with some of the most memorable people ever while working in the customer service department at Sears. Some of them were friends for life. Some of them are no longer with us. But then even more through the years as the J.M. Fields company as a store manager in several cities, and then thousands or more at my Smitty's Sports Shop store in my hometown of Brunswick, Georgia. But you can bet on one thing. I never did spend another day outside working in the cold and heat. Now, I'm not saying that working outdoors is a bad thing, as many great people do it all the time, but see, that was my motivation at the time. See, folks, all that I had in the back of my mind, driving me, was how I had spent the early part of my childhood and how I had vowed that I would not live like that or bring children into that kind of environment. But since that time, I spent most of my life in the team-building industry, but it didn't come easier. By the way, my dad later on found salvation and totally changed into another man. But the rest of that is a story for another day. But what I discovered a long time ago, if you want something, go get it. Don't sit around waiting on it. You got to go get it. Folks, I've been kind of like that old lump of coal that was continued to reform itself into a diamond under a lot of pressure over the years. And I guess I've been self-polishing for a long, long time. It's still somewhat rough, but I'm trying to get there little by little. You know, it's taken a lot of time, a lot of elbow grease, a lot of mistakes, a few wrong turns, but one thing that folks who I worked with for any length of time, the ones who really know me will tell you, back in that time, there was never any quit in me. None whatsoever. Let me tell you something. Everybody you know, or that is that you think you know, who has had any kind of success has gone through some tough times. And I can promise you this, without a doubt, that they have had their own share of mistakes, their own wrong turns. Well, anyone says how lucky I am and how I must have been born with a silver spoon in my mouth, well, you be the judge. Because, as Paul Harvey said, now you know the rest of the story. Now, back to my original thought. Why do you need to hear stories like these? Because winning isn't about who you were. It's not about where you were born. It isn't about who your parents are. It isn't about the circumstances you were born into. It isn't about how smart you are. There are a bunch of rocket scientists working way beneath their education at salaries 1/3 of what they used to make when NASA was in full swing. It isn't about the color you are. It's not about the religion you are. It's not about what country you live in. See, I'll guarantee you that some of the greatest money earners in the future will not be the ones that society says should be successful. It'll be the people like you and me. And here's why. It's what's in your heart that counts. That's what defines the real you. Art Williams used to tell us that aptitude tests were absolutely worthless at telling you whether you would be good at a particular job. See, you might have heard a little story. Well, it's been told that if every animal had to take a test that required every animal to climb a tree to pass the test in order to stay alive, most of the animals on Earth would have died a long time ago. Art Williams said this, quote, "There's never been a test that could measure the size of the heart, the size of the fight inside any man or any woman," end quote. See, the true test comes when we have to think outside of the box that society puts us in. The true test comes from deep within you in the deep recesses where written tests don't go. You are the ones with the heart. Wherever you came from, you are the ones that will make it big time. See, some of you have what I call stickability. The ones who don't run away looking for something else where they might get a little instant satisfaction. The winners will do whatever they have to do to stick it out because they know in their hearts that they will win long term. Hey, remember what I said. If you want something, go get it. You don't sit around waiting for it. You got to go get it. Keep the blinders on, folks. Stay focused. keep moving forward. Welcome to the revolution, your revolution. God bless you. Make it an awesome day. Thanks for tuning in today. And I look forward to seeing you all in the winner's circle. Goodbye for now.